Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. I am back from my trip. Went to Japan and had an amazing time. Definitely was a uh, awesome, unique, weird experience. I've been in Costa Rica, know that language a little bit better, a little bit easier to get around, but of course we also had interpreters with us. So this was quite the different experience with barely any English around, but still was very amazing and um, just a wonderful time. So, as I mentioned before, I just ran out of time to get everything done with getting some lectures up and going. So here's that first one back. I was jet lagged pretty bad the other day, and my mind is now coming around. So let's do kind of a basic look at some scientific writing tips, and then we'll explore that even more in the next lecture. So, four things to consider when writing. First off, writing is hard work. Now, here's the good news. You all are doing really good. You're doing great. The old adage is good reading is hard writing. And I can say from reading the assignments last term that you all do a really good job with writing. And so, just from kind of a starting point, as somebody who is outside of your discipline, even though I'm involved in healthcare, I don't, I'm not involved with patients in the same way that you are. I'm not looking at things the same way. I'm oftentimes not involved with certain patient populations. And so the way you wrote made it very easy for me to be able to read and understand. And so writing takes practice, but you are already demonstrating some great skill in that area. Now, we are transitioning to more of the dissertation product. And with that, you need to be prepared to write, and rewrite again. And there's going to be probably multiple drafts. Now, for this class, you'll be turning in a draft, but less feedback will be coming from me overall. Now, I'll give some feedback because I'll be coming at this as a layperson, as a quote unquote reviewer, but it's going to be your dissertation team that is going to really know the material and give you the feedback that you need to make this a potentially publishable product. Now, writing is an idiosyncratic process, and so again, continue to be open to criticism, constructive criticism from your dissertation team. And then, of course, writing takes time. And I know that you are all busy right now as you're doing your clinical work. So, organizing for the writing task, again, you've been successful in this area. You're building upon what you did already. Make sure you set aside uninterrupted time to write. That's important. You're not going to get into the groove of things if you're only giving yourself 15 to 30 minutes to work on something. So try to give yourself a block of time, whether that's in the evening, whether that's on the weekend, and find a spot that you won't get interrupted. And I know that that can be a challenge if you've got family, if you've got other obligations. This next one here, prepare an outline of the major sections of the proposal. You've got most of those kind of locked into place. But what I want to alert you to is that whether you're doing a systematic review or a scoping review, look at not only prior examples that we have illustrated in class, but look at prior examples of potential papers or excuse me, look at examples published in journals that may be of interest to you. And so when you can see that pattern, you know what the editorial team is looking for, and that will be helpful for you. Now, you've done a first draft already. This is a list of writing task things. As you write, I guess probably the way we could say this is as you're writing something, don't worry about so much about grammar and punctuation at the start. As you're adding new things in or as you're revising things, just kind of write, just let it flow and then come back to it, fine tune it later Now we're going to talk about some of the fine-tuning stuff in the next screencast, but just kind of get pen to paper, put things down, and then step away for a day or two, come back and take a look at it and make those edits before you send it to your dissertation team. Now, some common problems with writing. A major problem is the use of imprecise language, or sometimes conversational language. You want to write things with a scientific or technical writing approach and avoid non-essential or extraneous words. So here's some rules, some things to think about, and we'll explore each of these in the subsequent slides. So first off, stay away from jargon. Jargon can have varied meanings. So make sure to clearly define phrases that could be misinterpreted. And that's something through a review process that a good reviewer will, go through things and be very deliberate looking at the meaning. We want to make sure that the meaning of what you're trying to say is expressing your thought clearly. So, for example, calibrating raters. If you're to write something like calibrating raters, is this a reliability assessment of the things performed by a researcher, or does this mean that you are calibrating the machine? Avoid words that are trendy. So, for example, cutting edge. The prescription of a certain supplement may be state of the art, or the use of virtual reality may be cutting edge, but those types of trendy words or phrases should be avoided. Do not cut corners with abbreviations. Now, there are times that abbreviations are appropriate. So, for example, if I was writing something within physical therapy literature, I might talk about range of motion. I would spell out range of motion first, and then in parentheses put ROM behind it. What this is talking about here is avoiding abbreviations like etc. or the phrase so forth. So that's considered more of a lazy way of writing, and it's not a full expression of thought, or it's an inadequate development of thought. The point here being that if something was important to discuss, you would want to list everything out. If you were wanting to put an etc., you should write everything out that etc. stands for. Now, the way to get around this is not using etc., but maybe using the abbreviation E.G. which is then used for example, and then by doing that, parentheses E.G., and then you could give one or two examples. That could be a way of getting around listing everything. But avoid the things like etc. and so forth. Also, avoid overly broad phrases. And here are some kind of tips for trying to avoid using big words or long phrases. It creates kind of clunky writing. So, for example, do not use an excessive amount of when you can say too much. Or, for example, at a high level of productivity, just put highly productive. Or in view of the fact that, use because. So you want to look for phrases like this that could be shortened. And this is important because, again, when you get to the point where you think about publication, there may be a publication word maximum, like 3,000 words. And so looking to make any of those edits could be beneficial for you. Avoid redundant phases. Sometimes these are things that we do within conversation, saying things like, in that period of time, okay, that's redundant in nature, or something like, it was green in color. So again, looking for those things to avoid. Keep overused phrases to a minimum. a thorough search of the literature. That might be kind of the most common one that we would look at. So hopefully, if you're doing a literature review, you're doing a thorough search. So you don't need to say a thorough search of the literature or a large body of information. Okay, what's another way of potentially saying that? These overused phrases, they're oftentimes thought as an indication of inadequate development of one's thought. And then watch out for unclear reference, like they and their. So who is that referring to? So an example from a book I've got here: the homeless are among the most disenfranchised and underserved who could greatly benefit from the services of health and human service professionals. They would contribute significantly to their health and well-being, ... So in this case, who is they? Is it the health and human service professionals doing something to help the homeless? Or is they referring to the homeless that they could potentially contribute to their health and well-being by X, Y, and Z? Writer's block. Again, you've been pretty successful of getting things done. So you found strategies there. These are oftentimes listed as causes. I'm sure that fatigue is something you're having to deal with here as you're working through things this term with your clinical duties. Try to avoid procrastination, kind of get back to what we had talked about earlier with having set time. And by doing that, you'll avoid having a lack of time. And then how to beat writer's block: quiet, comfortable areas. Background music can be helpful. I know for myself, I like to use either classical or jazz music just because it helps distract that portion of the brain that is distractible. But I don't listen to music with words because I sometimes start thinking too much about the story being told by the singer or by the musicians. And I also try to avoid, pop music or rock music that I have more of a connection to. By doing something with jazz or classical, it just is just the right amount of input to help me stay focused. Again, schedule a time and then break down sections into specific tasks. One thing that can be very challenging is you're going into it with the mindset that you're going to finish the paper that day. And instead, maybe create yourself a little goal of, okay, I'm going to finish my discussion section today, or I'm going to work on my abstract first, and in any remaining time, I'm going to edit my introduction section. Now, you've sent me your dissertation team information, and the dissertation team, they're going to be helpful now in this process. You've got your point person, or quote unquote the chair. That person you're going to work closely with as you proceed through things, and then of course get the rest of the team involved with editing and revising. So you've discussed different ways that you're going to go about that process and kind of not divvy up the work, but kind of manage the flow of feedback that you get. And that's excellent. Good work on that. And again, that's the value of your dissertation team here, where they're helping out with what should be in something like this. They're the content experts along with yourself. They know what can be important to include, and they also have, or many of them have, experience in the writing process and will be able to, again, give you those important, critiques. And we'll talk more about some of those things next week to help you with your writing. And so when we get into things next week, I'm going to be sharing examples from things that you wrote last term. And what I'm going to try to do is do so in a way that de-identifies individuals, but gives good examples of things that either worked really well or things that we want to kind of avoid doing.